Okay, so what you have sent us so far is we got this. It said relation building, and I don't think any of us knew exactly what that was.
Okay.
So we have this that said resource partners. I can make this bigger or smaller, just so you know, but I just want to make it big enough that everybody could see it. We've got this, which was your manufacturing list, which, if I counted right, I think you have like 22 fields in there. So we thought we'd probably end up breaking that up into one or more tables. We have this, which was your contacts. We have this, which was your industries. And we have this, which was employees. All right. And in addition to that, we have the screenshots of what you sent us. All right. So I guess anybody jump in if you think I'm misspeaking. One of the things that we were looking for was how everything here is connected. There seemed to be, listening at the meeting when we were there and when you were here last time, that one of the biggest issues is there is, for lack of better words, maybe not the best of communication as far as the old left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And it sounded as though you would like that to be rectified in a way that, if possible, maybe it would be you or maybe someone else would be more or less in charge. You'd have a focal point for the data.
Right.
And then when it had to be updated, it would be updated in one area and it would be updated immediately for everyone.
Right.
Right? All right. The stage is yours. Ask questions.
So my question is, as far as the spreadsheets, I think that the research,
Want the research one?
Research part content.
yeah, I think that
Resource?
The contact one.
The contact.
research part.
Yeah,
This
that one, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that that sheet should be taken off, because those same contacts are in,
Or in the other spreadsheet, in the manufacturing spreadsheet. You're absolutely correct. So I think that what you guys had tasked me with was, if you guys were gonna set fire to my feed, if I didn't give you every spreadsheet that I was using or we were using as an organization within 24 hours, you know, what spreadsheets would I send to you? So what I did is I did this on purpose. So you're absolutely correct. So if you go to the manufacturing survey, or the manufacturing one, right? And you look at those names, so here you have Natoli Engineering, and I'm sure that if you, and here's Nike, right? And Proper, and doesn't matter. All of those are in the research part. But this sheet, if you go all the way across, I got this sheet from Reference USA. All right, Reference USA is a database that you can access at the library, national database, and I put in the parameters that I wanted to know about manufacturing in St. Charles County. Okay, so this is their information that it spit out for me. Right, so I took that database information and I have it into an Excel spreadsheet so that I could create a report, okay? The reason why I put it here is because much of this information, where you see how many employees they have, how much in sales they have, the contact information, this should be their SIC code. Would you go up to the top, because I want to make sure that I'm correct on that. Yeah, this is their primary SIC code. You have a primary NAICS code that should be somewhere in here.
And what are those? What's a SIC code?
SIC code and a NAICS code are the codes that the U.S. government have created to identify industry by number. okay? So if you look at the primaries and so the question is why are all these different, you know, and so that goes back to, okay, well, this one's trucking equipment, this one's considered manufacturing, this is manufacturing of casting steel. So every company that has casting steel will have, and they consider that to be their primary mission as a company, that's what I need. So I need to know, okay, if I'm looking for all the companies that do aerospace manufacturing, right? Both of these have a primary SIC code that are the same. And so I need to know all of them because we're creating an alliance. So it's important. I don't care about secondary, but I do care about these two categories.
And now, just for your edification, like with this, that would make total sense in a database to
Right.
be a table.
Right.
Which means that you could pull this
Yep.
out of what you have right now, and you'd keep this in there as what's called a foreign key. But then you would be able to come in and write queries where you would say, show me everybody where the SIC code is 384.104.
Exactly.
And is that the kind of stuff you're looking for?
Yes. So then if you go back to the research part, because that was your question, so the question is why all of a sudden do I have this one with the, is this one it? No, this is the resource partners. There's another one. It was research partners.
Oops, hold on. Sorry. Sorry about that. Gotta clear that. Okay.
You're good.
All right.
That's resource. Go back
And we want
again.
which one? This is
I want to
relationship?
go, nope,
That one? Okay.
go back.
Go
Go
contact.
here. And I want you to go to contacts research part.
That one.
This one, no, yeah, there you go.
There we go.
Okay, so
Hey,
to
I'm printable.
answer your question, right, if you look at the information that was in what Reference USA gives me versus my own personal knowledge, it may be different. So I'll give you an example. My contact at Supply Networks Distribution Management is Misty Wilson. She's the office manager. The other sheet gives you the president or the CEO. And if I don't have anybody to contact, I at least need to know who the president and CEO is, right? So going back to it needs to be eliminated, ding, ding, ding. But right now, all of my data is in all of these different spreadsheets. That's the problem that I'm facing. Does that
So-
make sense? Does that answer your question? Yes, this needs to be eliminated, but it needs to be combined with everything else.
Can't you add the contact field on, to the other one?
Sure. Oh my God, this is, you asked me how we're keeping data. This is how I'm keeping my data.
Gotcha.
So are the people that are on this one right here,
Uh-huh.
are these more primary, whereas the ones that are in the other one is like everybody?
Go
Or
down. No, go down. Yeah, see, if you see, this was my way of keeping track of a meeting. I was inviting these people to a meeting that happened on Wednesday. Okay? So when I called Vencor, if you look up top, I have somebody else's name. But then she told me, Vencor, right here, Susan Groney, right? But Susan, and that's her phone number, told me that the person that I really need to contact was David Burkhoff. And that's his phone number. And so this is why this is a mess. So even if I had put it into Access, I still have no way to pull out what I'm looking for, because I need to know that Susan and David both work for Vencor.
so it sounds like you need both a primary contact
And
and a secondary contact.
And actually, I might have more than just a primary and a secondary. How rare, I mean, that's kind of rare to have more than two contacts.
But it wouldn't be impossible.
But it wouldn't be impossible, exactly. So you're right. So the type of information that I'm looking for to have on Vencor, or let's go back to the other one. Go down here.
Oh,
Go back to my St. Charles County manufacturers. Go over.
So what?
So let's look at Napide.
Want Vencor?
Oh, sure.
Are they in there?
Vencor might not even be on here. You know, who knows? Nope.
Doesn't look like it.
See, and Vencor's not even on this list. So go up top, we'll do Napide, which is right over across the street from you all. Or Craftsman Industries. So Craftsman Industries, right? John Dolan, I don't even know who he is. My main contact over there is Margaret Kenyon. But as I go across, I need their address, city, state, zip. I don't really care about the credit score. This is what Reference USA is giving me because this is a professional database that they're giving you all the information on a particular company. I don't care that they're a male, but I do care about their title. Their fax number, I'm sorry, fax numbers don't really exist anymore. I don't need fax numbers. Some of this other stuff is stuff that I also don't need. But you see where it says location, employees, and then location sales. That's important for me to know. Number, and we already talked about the SIC codes. SIC and NAICS, we tend to deal more with NAICS than SIC, but that's just my own, actually having both of them may not be a bad thing. So then you asked me a question, go back to there. Go back to relationship building. Okay, so if you remember, so I'm going to show you this real quick because nobody got this, right? However, what I want you to do now is I want you to take this and keep it in your mind for a second and go to Word. And I want you to go to the screenshots. And I want you to go down, please. This. Remember I told you that my personal me, so if we're going to build this database right around me because you guys love me and I'm the only one standing here in front of you, I need to know what phase of that relationship building I'm in with that company. You guys know about the art of sales, right? Right? So 3 times before somebody even recognizes that they've talked to you, 5 times before they take action, 5 to 7 times before they take action. So that's kind of the same thing where I'm at. So when you look at, go back to that relationship building, I created my tables so that, back to screenshot, so that I had a downward arrow and I could just put it in there because I don't want people typing. I want everything based off of the table because to err is, come on, everybody knows Benjamin Franklin, right? To err is
Human.
Or computer, whatever you want to do. AI, it's AI, no. So that's what that spreadsheet was. That was a direct correlation to these down arrows here.
Now, all the stuff that you have in here on all these pages, these 7 pages, currently, are those 7 different files, or is it one file that's humongous?
Yes. So it is one file that's access. So this is all my access database. And if you remember me saying, I went back to old school, right? Creating my own screens of what I needed, my navigation panes. All of these were attached to different tables within access. So that what the relationship building one that I put into an access database for you was, or what into an Excel was actually an access, so that I could combine those 2 together.
And the other question that I had, you were talked before about us putting your feet to the fire, but I want to maybe phrase it a little differently. Let's say that you have 10 things that you want to do right now, okay? Would you be able to prioritize them and say, this one, if it was done first, would help me more than anything else?
Yes, so that was a conversation
Because
that
I think we have to start writing that
Right.
down, or me annotating it here is fine too,
Right.
but
So go up. This screenshot, contact information is primary. And if you would go down, please, past mine even, hurts my heart. Go down past financing. Crony categories. Did you guys figure out a new phrase for me yet on that? No?
Not quite.
Crony actually is a good word. Did you know that? I was thinking that it meant, like gangster, but it actually was a 1920s term that meant friend. I know, right? Learn something new every day. So in this particular category, however it is that we want to phrase it, I got a request this morning. And she wants me to send her all the contacts for the St. Charles County Chamber of Commerce executive directors. And she also wants me to send, it's not on here, a list of all the St. Charles County mayors. And I don't have a quick way to be able to do that.
Now, is what you just asked
And
for,
send it.
is that information in your tables?
Yes. Right now, it is in our access database. So what I find to be difficult about access, and the reason why I was looking for something else, is that access does not let me export. I don't know if you, unless you have some way that you'd like to show me today that I can learn something. When I go and I create this list, it doesn't let me export it to an Excel spreadsheet so that I can send that. It lets me do a report, right? But then nobody else if I want to be able to have somebody else manipulate that data for themselves or put it into their own system, it's not letting me do that. And I also can't export from Outlook. Well, look at that.
Click the Export XLS button. You can choose to export all tables or just the table that you currently have up.
See, but what I wanna do is I wanna be able to create that query, only have,
Like
X
amount of things.
X amount of people in it. If I have 1,000 people in my database, I wanna just do the 5 city mayors, right?
So you're saying you want that instead of the whole table when you're trying to export, is what you're saying?
Right. I wanna be able to have that ability.
Well, it sounds then like you want to run a query,
Right.
and then you want to take the query and take the results of the query and export that to Excel.
Right.
See, what they're learning in here right now is, for lack of better words, the parent of Access.
Right.
It's SQL Server. All right, and we talked a little bit about some of the problems and foibles, so to speak, of working with Access when we were at your place last time. These people are not trained in Access.
Oh, and I'm not married to Access.
Well, and the other thing too is, the way I was looking at it is,
I'm showing you what we are working with.
and the reason I was asking you about prioritization is they could build a form like this for you. They could, everybody in this room could. And then we're learning now how to link that to the database.
Okay.
All right, and but then you're going to need the ability, like you said, to come up with certain queries and whatever those queries are.
Right.
All right, and where they are in their career right here, to be honest with you, it would probably be easier for them to do it. It would probably be easier for us to do this in MySQL from what we learned last semester. All right, and we could do that. The problem is, and you can link that up, but the good thing about doing it with what we're doing right now is you could make forms, and you could make forms that look just like this. All right, and we could make forms that look like this, and we could have them talk to the database. I don't even think that would be all that difficult, but for her to be able to go in there and basically run any query she wants, that takes a little more code and a little bit more time and a little bit more effort. All right, that's why when I was asking you as far as what your prioritization is. I mean, literally, because we talked about doing this yesterday, we probably could have taken this and told you how we would set that up into a database and into X number of tables. But one of the reasons I told them not to go further was, like, for example, you mentioned before, I don't even need that credit rating. Well, then why should we put it in there?
Right.
So what we need to do is to identify what is in here that you don't need, what is not in here that you do need,
Okay.
and exactly what you need to be doing with this.
Right. So, if we want to we'll start here and we will work our way. I forget why I created this. Because it was a list for something, wasn't it? I don't know what the list was for. Obviously the company name.
Sure. In fact, I'll tell you what. Let's just take everything you know you're going to want.
I would just delete the tables. I would delete the columns that I don't want. Go to the credit score.
Well,
delete that
what I'm
out.
saying is the other thing we can do is we'll just take these and make them blue or green or whatever, what you do want. And
Right.
then that way the other stuff is in here. You can keep it for logging purposes or whatever if you want to do that. Like
So
you
the
said,
name-
of course you'd need.
Right. Name, last name, address, city, state, zip. I don't need the credit card.
Okay. You said you don't need the executive sex,
No.
but you do need the title.
Yes.
Facts you said you didn't
No.
need.
And I don't know what that IUSA number is. I probably should.
I wonder if that's an ISO. Could that be an ISO type of number, or isn't that an ISO format? I don't even know.
I have no idea.
Okay.
Location employees, yes. So here's the interesting thing about that location employees. Can you go to that screenshots, please? Go up. Up. All right, go down. So there's two different types of numbers. There's real numbers and pretend numbers. And sometimes I need to have the pretend numbers as well as the real numbers. So I know.
What do you mean by pretend
I'm
number?
gonna
Okay,
explain
sorry.
this to you, right? So when I talked to Nike yesterday or 2 days ago, they have 150 employees on site right now, and they're jumping up to 175. So right now, that number is 150. In 6 months to 9 months from now, that number is going to go up to 325. But go back to that or go back down to that spreadsheet. This one, not that one. That one. Nope. There. If you come over here, it may tell me that they have 100 to 250, right? Because this is a guesstimate. And I may not have the real number. I may only have the guesstimate based on Reference USA. My goal is to have the real number, right, that's been verified.
Out of curiosity too, with the one that you're saying that you're getting from whatever you just mentioned that was.
Right.
Okay, I understand it's an estimate. Is that something that comes out yearly? Or
So-
that database, how often, the database that you're getting that from, do you know how often that is updated?
No, not really, but it would be my goal to start off with the 100 to 250, but then to go to that employer and say, hi, can I have your numbers? Now, there are manufacturers, there are companies in St. Charles County that will tell you that they have XYZ amount of employees, but they don't want anybody to know about it, but they rank between 2,000 and 1,800. You understand what I'm saying? So sometimes we just have those kind of numbers. But what I'm saying is that on that other screenshot where I've got like a drop-down box or, whatever that, just so I could make sure that that number was in there, sometimes that number is not gonna be a whole number. Sometimes it's gonna have a two, a from and a to number. Okay, go back to the spreadsheet. And that is really important. Location of sales, I would like in there. Phone number, obviously. Primary sick and primary sick description. And those are, did I send you, go to, industries. Go to the industry.
So why do you have an industry if you have the industry code, basically?
Because I'm an idiot and I didn't put it in there.
No, see, but this
Well,
is, but
but
this
that's
isn't,
An ID number for the
right,
industries. And
that would
has
end
to-
up being the primary key then.
That would be the key.
And
Right.
in fact, we probably wouldn't even do, we'd have three fields, just a field called ID, like where you've got your numbering there.
Right.
Then we would have another field that would maybe say sick code and then sick description. When what that means is, by doing that, is that in here, you don't need the description in here anymore. You just need the code. So this is gonna
And-
really shrink down your table, because then when you have to query, you'd query both tables together to get what information you
Right.
needed.
And that was, I think that was my original intent, if you go back to that table, cause I went to the US blah, 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 and those aren't sick codes, those are NAICS codes. The ones, that whole description thing. So there are two different numbers and there are two different sets of descriptions.
Okay, well, that would say two different tables, and then you'd put the code for each into
Right.
this, and back into here.
And I'm trying to remember why I just did industry and I didn't actually put the codes in there. That's a really good question, why I didn't do that. Would you go back to that industry table? And I have a feeling that what it was, go back to the screenshots, please. Go, okay, yeah. And that's what it, cause it just made it easier, I think,
Oh, so you could have a full
for just to have that there, and I just had a full list, and that way I didn't have somebody typing in government,
Right.
versus government, so,
No,
and
I'm-
that's
Well,
why.
and I
wanted
think
to
we
do
all
it that way.
see what you're talking about as far as, yeah.
And I think
more-
maybe if we just maybe we don't need the sick codes. Maybe we don't need that. It's more important, because I'm pretty sure that when I looked at that industry list, that it was specific enough that we would just need to have that industry. Would you go back to the industry list? I'm sorry.
No,
I hate to keep making you go
That's
back
fine.
and forth, but would you go down? See, you've got auto manufacturers, the only manufacturing, distribution, manufacturing. And I did take some out. Food products manufacturing. What I'm afraid of, here's what I'm afraid of, and this is the reason why the SIC codes and the NAICS codes make sense. If I'm looking for a manufacturer and I only type in manufacturing, you're gonna miss all of the other ones, because you might get manufacturing and distribution and manufacturing miscellaneous, but you're gonna miss food.
Yeah.
You're gonna miss railroad, you're
Steels.
gonna miss the rest of them.
this is, just so you know, this is kind of what they're doing though. So imagine here, and I'm not even saying this is what you'd want, but let's just say here, you'd have a drop-down list, and this would be the industry, whatever it happens to be. And then as soon as you choose that, what's gonna come up in here is a list of everything that meets that criteria. So that's
Yeah,
And
that's what that was.
And, right, and that's what I'm looking for. Well, what I'm saying is, you could do that, but what I mean is if you wanted all the information about everybody, so in here, let's say it was manufacturing, you wanted all the people that, you know, are in your database that are manufacturing, that's what we would bring in there. We can bring anything you want in there. And this is the kind of stuff that they're doing. In fact, they just worked on a test where we were doing some stuff, we were working with basically a mythical loan company, all right? And they could come in here and they could come in and they could ask for the type of loan. We came up with 8 types. So they could choose college, and it would be all the people who had a college loan type of thing. Understand?
Oh, so not just that you had a Freddie Mac or a Freddie Mae or a Pell,
Yeah, it would
you
be,
know,
yeah.
that all of those came up that way.
Yes. And I mean,
Got it, yeah.
that's what we're getting into. And if you wanted to do it by state, or up here, you could put the loan officer, so you could get their name in here, and that would be all the people in here that they had written out loans to. That's the kind of thing that we're doing. So that's why I was asking you with this, because if we set up a table for you or a database for you, we could set it up so we could have as many pages like this as you needed, where you would tell us what you wanted here and what you wanted to come in down here.
So with that, you can take, I mean, you'll have, let's say, manufacturing. You can have those fields for, like, obviously you can have in there, you can have a thing for SIC code, but, like, it'll have, if there's, like, sub-tiers, I guess is the way to put it, like, inside manufacturing.
Do
can put
you
that on there.
have access to the internet?
Yes.
So,
I know what you're saying, because I'm about to show you what I think we're all talking about. Can you go to the St. Charles County Libraries?
Just their homepage.
Yep. And then go to e-library. Now, y'all pay attention, because y'all need to know this. This is the most important thing that you're going to learn today, right? There should be one for business, e-research. Go to yeah. No. Up, sorry. What I wanted to show you is I think we're all speaking the same language.
Do you know what you're looking for exactly?
Yeah, I do.
Because I can try to search for it.
Yeah, I'm looking for reference USA.
Right.
I was gonna say, try resource.referenceusa.com.
Except that you can't get into it.
Okay.
I'm getting into my free.
Yeah, correct.
Good.
Well, yeah, St. Charles County Library. Yep, do that. Yep, electronic resources. Under reference.
Well, I'll just go to R.
Yep. Reference USA.
There you go.
All right, type that in. Tell us if it's right
I
side
was gonna say
up.
the one here.
Yeah, the 900-719-6944. And PIN is 7834. Now y'all can get into my account. But y'all realize that you can do it on your own if you go to the library, right?
But no one will remember this anyway.
Okay, go to the U.S. Business database.
Right
You
here.
can go to search. Right underneath there. There you go. So, go to advanced search, which is that second tab. And now you guys are going to figure out what it is that I'm talking about in terms of the codes. And I think that we're all speaking the same language. So if you go to major industry groups and then keyword sick and NAICS, right? So here you have, these are the major industry groups, and now you can search for all the sick and the NAICS codes. So if you type in manufacturing, and then hit search, this is what your box looks like, right?
Yeah, you could
Yeah.
put in a code for that.
Yeah,
Or you
so,
could pick it from that drop down.
yeah,
Right.
so,
So that you and I, we're speaking the same language, because this is what I need to make sure of, is that I'm not gonna miss the container steel part of manufacturing, right? When I hit manufacturing inside my,
yeah,
and it gets this, and the problem. Okay, so here's what I also don't want. We can get really, really complicated, and I prefer not to do that. And then, so that whole exporting, that one sheet of St. Charles County manufacturing, this is where I got this from. So there is a database out there that has all that information in, and then I export it. So, and now it would be nice to combine that information with not just the manufacturers that I'm working with, but also the schools that we're working with, and the small business owner that walks dogs, and all that stuff, that when I go into our database to go and try to find all of those people, that I have a way of finding them. So, but that's where, I think that what we're talking about is the same thing, right? Where you type in manufacturing and all that stuff comes
yeah.
up.
You can, what I was saying with that is, you can look up, like, or you can go to the drop down, let's say, of, I mean, each one of the things that you have, like, you can have an actual food manufacturing thing, like, all of these different things can all be in this drop down. So that way you wouldn't necessarily have to have SIG codes for them. If that would make it easier for you, because you said you didn't necessarily need them if it was specific enough. So you could have that, it'd be a lot of drop down, but it'd be like having a state there too. So it'd be almost the same, like similar to that. But depending on how many there are, that could be a lot.
Right.
So,
So if we stick to, I think if you scroll up,
so I mean, I don't know if you actually like, you could do a drop down and then a drop down again, like if like breaking it down more, but
go ahead and click off of the keyword. And if you, so if we look at, no, if we, you know, so you're really, these are your major,
right,
these are your major categories, right?
right,
And all I'm doing is following U.S. business standards, U.S. Census, Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's all I'm doing here. That's all I want to do in my own database. I don't want to recreate the wheel.
It sounds as if the first step would be to try to get some kind of a database set up for you. In which case, we probably would need, it sounds like much of the work you do is based on the Access database that you created with those tables. We've got the screenshots, but we don't have the actual table information.
I'll give you I will put that in there. I will hand you our 2016 Access database. So this is how bad this has gotten. We have one that's marked 2016. We don't have one that's marked 2017 because nobody has bothered to maintain it, number one. Number two is the woman who was in charge of it would copy the database from year to year because she didn't trust that anybody else coming into her database wasn't going to screw it up. So we have databases going back to like 10 years. So it'll say Access 2010, Access 2011. I'd like to get rid of that. I'd like to have one fluid, always working database. And the only reason why I'm telling you Access is because that's what we currently have. I am not married to it. So I can put that into the Dropbox That's what you, so you have, I'm assuming you have access to access?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
But then the next step would be, after we get that information, would be to have you back or come by you or whatever and say, okay, this is how we envision stuff, because it may not be a direct mapping where you think, you know, you may have some tables that are real huge. You may have some tables that maybe have some information you don't need, or maybe you say, you know, I really wish I'd have done this and this. So rather than doing it the way that you have it, where you may want things changed, it would make more sense to get the database and then look at the data, maybe even print out some of it, and then say, okay, then talk to you again.
Go back to the screenshots. Those screenshots, every single one of those fields has data in it. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And I'm just using this one. So if you look at the table, the access table, there is a field for each one of these fields. There's going to be no surprises with that.
And what I'm saying is, you know, is it possible that with any of those fields or those tables rather, that maybe, oh, it would be really nice if I had this in there and I
Yep.
don't have it there right now.
Right. So that was why I was creating those other ones. Those so they came up as Excel spreadsheets rather than Access, but that's what they are. They're in Access. So if we go down, right, so everywhere that I have a drop-down box. So obviously this is the employee table.
Industry table.
I have industry table. I have these tables, which we've already talked about, if you want to drop. IDA terms and loan customer. So if they don't have anything here, they're not a loan customer of ours yet. So, and then that needs to be a yes or no field. Then these are all, again, just positive, negative. How do you guys term it?
Checkboxes.
Yeah.
I have a question real quick. So you say that all of these things have tables. So
This one does.
right.
that
So
one does.
on the last floor that we've seen, they've had the entered by and the employee table and the industry table. Are you wanting that just on one form one time and then have the rest of the check boxes underneath that, or all the different boxes underneath that, or are you
So-
wanting this like on separate?
So here's the fun part,
Yes.
right? I didn't know any other way to do this.
Okay, I was asking. I don't know
Right.
if that was something that
So what I really would like to have had, if you want to go up to the first page, right, is that this be the page that I say, well, it doesn't have on here, that it was entered by Debbie.
Yeah.
Right? That, you know, and on the second page, which is company information, that this is where you're allowed to put in what kind of industry it is, but that this is already
already done.
mirrored to the front page.
Okay.
Because the other thing that I found with this is that, because of the way that I had it, if I was scrolling, it changed the employee's name over and over and
Oh,
over
yeah.
again.
You didn't click out of
So, like, this had started out as Amanda and ended up as Christine. You see the Debbie's on one, and this is all the same guy,
Yeah.
you know. So that became a problem for me that I couldn't figure out how to, you really had to pay attention. And if you noticed, each page for the same company has different people, and it shouldn't be that way. It should be that the front page, Debbie put it in, this is Debbie's contact, or she's the last person to touch this data, right? The industry, it should be put in once. If the
Right.
industry is on the
Right,
other
that's what I was
pages,
gonna ask
that
you.
it's not on every single
Right.
one.
Okay. Yeah. Because that's what I was wondering.
Right, yeah, no. I didn't know how to fix that.
Right. No,
I
I was just curious.
was
Okay.
just doing it. I was like, how can I do this? So if you go down, I'm trying to see if there's any other. No. See, and the rest of this is just check boxes.
Because I mean, this could almost also be like, I mean, like forms, like you're saying. So you could have like the entered by, like you're saying, for that table. So then you could have like a button or something on the end that switches to the next tab, and it would have that. You might even be able to have like at the top, like just a label or whatever. Is what we're saying, like of what that, or who entered it or who was entering it. So that way you don't have that checkbox anymore. It just puts the value in the next like page if you need to see something, and like if you need to like figure something out.
Well, and
You
the
don't
way
necessarily have to
the way
have
that you can do that is after they put a value in, you can disable
right.
the drop down.
Okay.
That's what I was.
You know, now that would assume that either, you know, what you probably want to do then is before they check out, you'd want to ask them, okay, this has been disabled. It said it was put in by Debbie. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So if they accidentally chose the wrong one to begin with, they could say no, change it, and now is it correct? And then it would lock it in there, type of thing.
Something along those lines. Because like I said, and I'm something. Because I was screwing it up.
Yeah.
And I'm the one that was creating it. So then under these tenant codes, those are fixed numbers.
Okay.
There's no table to go along. Let's just say there's no table to go along with those. Even though it's gonna have to be user enter.
Okay.
Let's just, you cannot unhuman humans.
Yeah.
So you created this. So no, and I'm just saying, with it's 7 pages, and it's more than 7 tables.
No,
No,
it's basically one table.
I thought you said like the industry stuff was in a table.
Industries so the ones that I sent you, so the industry, the employees, and the relationship building were the 4 tables that I created outside of the main data. And all the rest of that, so the copier codes and the check boxes and all of that, those are in the main table. I did not create a new table for those, which was why it was getting to be really long. And that's when I stopped. Because I heard 200 columns, and that's about all that Access can handle, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'm gonna push its limits by doing it this way, because it was the only way I knew how to do it. So then, if you wanna go back to, so there's really only the 4, right? So industries, resource partners, no. Industries, employees, and relationship building were the only 3 tables that I built outside of the main database. All of those other things were in the main database. So then if you go back to the screenshots, see what other pages there are. Was that the last page?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel like the drop downs are those are the tables that you have outside of it, and then everything else that you put in the text boxes are being thrown into the main
Yes.
table, for lack of a better word, in Access.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
And when I send that to you, you'll go.
So total 4 tables.
That's it. That's all I had.
Just 3 of them are like subtables almost within the big table, if that makes sense.
No, it does.
And I was trying to figure out where else I could have subtables that I didn't want. Like, you know, and again, you know, you have to ask yourself, you know, do you trust the humans that are your professionals that you're working with? You know, does it make sense to do a state, you know, drop-down box? does it make sense to, and the only reason why I would say it makes sense to do a state is because when you're going to do labels, you want them to look consistent.
Right.
So do you want everything capitalized? Do you want things, capital, do you want it capital O, capital M, capital O? Or do you want it capital O, little o? And I've seen the gamut. Or do you want somebody to type in Missouri? Or do you want them to type, and if they type in Missouri, will they type it with right or wrong? And so those became the questions that I started to ask myself, and then I was like, my brain hurts.
I mean,
And then you're gonna see that with these phone numbers, that they all have a dot in them. I think I'm not really sure why we started putting dots and stuff. And that maybe, if you're gonna fix the field, that the field would be parenthesis, area code, end parenthesis, 3 numbers, tab to the 4 numbers.
That's something you can do.
Yeah.
You just
validation.
put in a validator there
Yeah,
that
they
says
know how
it
to
has
do
to
that.
be in this
Yes.
format.
In fact, there are built-in validators in the package that we're using. You can put in US phone number, and that's the way it'll expect it, so.
And like there's stuff in here that even I shake my head at, and I'm not really sure why professionally we went to dots. And yes, validating the data at all steps, I think, is imperative when you're talking about 20 people that have access.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, to Lisa's point, there's some things you can definitely do that would limit the amount of entry, I guess. Like state stuff, things that, like state can easily be done, obviously entered by different industries and stuff, so if they don't get typed in, that stuff can be frustrating. Validation can help with like making sure it's put in a certain way so that there's not going to be like lapses in information, so it makes a new field for no reason, stuff like that. And then the required fields, like they have to put something in, so it's not going to be like mishandled data and everything. So there's definitely ways to help supplement that, I guess. The biggest thing is going to be knowing whether or not you can, or what you want on each page. So like if they entered, like, are you going to want this as multiple pages where like you enter in this information for contact, let's say, like entered by this person. Then you go to the next page and it'll say on the top, like being entered by this person still. And so like as like a check, kind of like, oh, well, that's not right. There's a back that you can go back and you can change that. But other than that, it's just you go into the next page and then you fill out the industry or whatever is next. And then have the same kind of deal, like you can have like almost like a check on the right, I guess you could say, like this was picked almost, and like you can have it show that, or have like at the end have a confirm page or whatever it is before you actually do this. So that's all an option, but you have to kind of figure out what you want in each thing. And if these are the screenshots that you want, like specifically of what you want in each one of these forms, then that would be very helpful, because we can also go off of that. But if there's more that you need, or more like different things that you need for that, then we'll need to know that.
No, the reason why I sent you what I was working on, at the very beginning of all this, I had talked to each of the individual lines of business, and I said, what is it that you need? If you're gonna have a database, tell me what it looks like. And so what we determined is that each one of these, so the company info everybody uses, EDC financing is, our 504 loan program. The crony category was, is how are they related to us? And that's where our access database right now is used. This is how we know who the board of directors is. This is how we know who the mayors are. The marketing categories, I could care less right now about that. That's the least of my problems. The partners information is important. And the tenant information is important. So contact info, EDC financing, the categories, the partner's info, and the tenant. So, and then if you were gonna put those into some sort of order,
Right.
then contact information, category, partner, tenant, and I've just left myself out, didn't I? So I would say that I would say EDC financing and marketing categories are the least important.
Okay.
But these subsections here and the pages were all based off of conversation and research that I had done prior. So then, again, out of that, I would say take out marketing, take out EDC financing, make those the lowest priority, and then,
So right now, when Debbie comes in here, and she's gonna start putting in information, okay? I understand that each one of these is its own form, I get that. But is she basically going to be entering all 7 pages worth of this at one time? Or not necessarily?
it depends.
Cause I mean,
So here's the problem, right? It depends. So let's go ahead and use Christine Zika rather than Debbie. And so I have, let's just do this. Oh, of course I have all my cards today. I never have anybody. I always have everybody else's cards in my purse. Today I only have mine. How's that? All right, so let's use my card, right? I go to an event. Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. Hand me this card. Thank you very much. I'll be in contact. Peace, right? So I'm going to take this card and this information, and I'm going to put this information in. So obviously my name, my phone number, my all of this kind of contact information is on here. Now here's what's interesting. So let's say I took Margaret Kenyon's card out of my pockets today. So Margaret Kenyon works for Craftsman Industries, right? So I know who they are, and I want to make sure I have her information in. So I am then going to click onto company information. So I'm going to say, Margaret, I'd like to have a note in here where Margaret and I met, you know, so I can just have that information. That her company, Craftsman Industries, that I know, so now based off of the original information, I know that she's the HR manager for Craftsman, right? I know that Craftsman owns their own building. They're not just leasing space. So some of this stuff I'm gonna know just from the conversation. I wanna make sure it gets in. They're not a partner, although they're interested in becoming more community minded, right? So how do I make sure that that information gets in there? Well, obviously I send it to the person who's going to the partners group, but they're not a partner yet. So I'm not gonna do anything in that partners category. Then,
I brought it up. That's why I brought up partners.
right, so they're not a partner yet, so I'm not gonna go to this page. Go back up to company info. In the middle of our conversation, that's contact, it's one word out. In the middle of our conversation though, she said, hey, guess what? We have, 125 thriving employees. And oh, by the way, did you know that Craftsman Industries and Craftsman Trailers are actually owned by the same company? What? So now, you see where I'm going with this, right? I have to think. I have to be logical in my thinking, in my conversation, and then remember and try to get as much of that information in here. So that I can turn around and say, well, Margaret, last time that we talked, you said that you guys had 125 employees. Oh, Christine, we are doing so well. We are now up to 150.
Okay. I understand where you're going. So basically you're saying there's going to be some required fields, like who entered it in, what their name is, where they work, what industry there is. But other than that, you're just going to want it so that you can enter in information based on what you learned from your interaction with them.
Right. So now Mark Steele, who says to me, I'm really excited to be a part of Craftsman Industries and we're moving to St. Charles County and I have been a part of economic development boards in the past and I'd like to talk to you more about that. Woo, he pays up $15,000. So now I'm putting Mark Steele in here, right? Because Mark paid up $15,000 to become a partner and now we have him on the partners board,
Right.
right? But I also need to make sure that he's attached to Craftsman so that when I talk to him, I'm not asking him the same questions. I want to make sure that my company is consistent.
Right. So that.
So this information here, the number of employees, the sales, that kind of stuff, that when I bring up Craftsman Industries, even though Mark gets put in under Craftsman, that all that same information. That's going to be, I guess that's something that I never mentioned.
So yeah. I understand what you're saying.
Well, the other thing that I heard now, and I heard when we met over at your place too, was the importance of having, like you said, some kind of a notes
Yeah.
field in there.
Yeah.
That sounded like it was one of the most important things that was missing right now from what you have.
I don't think that's that difficult to do.
No, it's not that it's hard to do, but I'm just saying that
Text area.
it's, yeah, just put it in there as a text field, but it's something that would be necessary.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Margaret and I have a conversation. Margaret says, hey, Christine, we're at 125 employees. We're thinking about going, about expanding in 2018, right? So I'm going to go to wherever tasks things that I have, which is an Outlook, and I'm going to put a follow-up note in there. But when I go into this, I want to remember that conversation. Oh, they said they're expanding in 2018. So I can call her up and say, hey, Margaret, are you guys expanding this year? Do I need to introduce you to Michelle Hadaway so you can make sure you get your Missouri incentives for expanding?
Okay.
Those are the types, and that I think is what's really missing in all of the conversations that we have at the
Real life.
EDC in general. So that when Mark's talking to a 504 guy, he sends me an email and he says, hey, talk to this guy. But I don't know any of the interactions that he's had with them.
Right.
I don't know that he's been, had interactions with the EDC since 2006,
Right. It's just to go figure out or get information on. You can go pull that out of this
Right.
from what's been
Okay, I have to stop the tape and start it again because it breaks down after a little over an hour. So it'll take